I can see a city burn on the horizon. Sudden darkness fills the sky and hides the day. Though the fires have set me free from the clouds that cover me, I can't look away, I can't look away. I have climbed the valley side, scaled the mountain, but my freedom's still 1,000 miles away. Yet I'm frozen in mid-stride by this yearning deep inside. I can't look away, I can't look away.
Hi, Trevor, and welcome to this interview disc. Can't Look Away is your fourth solo album, actually. How did this one come about?
Well, I'd been planning to do a solo album for quite some time. In fact, before joining Yes, I had prepared a solo album. In fact, the material that became 90125 was to be my solo album, my fourth solo album. But I joined the band and used all that material with the band and did that on 90125 and then started preparing again for another album, for a solo album, and didn't get round to doing it because we were touring so much, and then there was another Yes album, and then touring again after the next Yes album. So roughly 6-7 years went by without doing a solo album. So eventually we were still touring, and I said, we got to stop, we got to just hang on for a while. I have to do this album. I really want to. It's in my blood, it's in my bones. I've got to do this album. So we stopped for a while, and that's when I went in and did the album.
You shared production with quite a heavy producer, Bob Ezrin. How did the two of you work together?
Bob Ezrin was turned out to be a real pleasure to work with. When I first met him, I thought he was going to be a real pleasure to work with, and I'd liked what he'd done in the past, from the Floyd stuff to the earlier Alice Cooper stuff. Right to, you know, I mean, years and years, he's a stalwart in the industry. But there was a period after we'd started where it was not friction, but there was no real understanding of what our roles were to be when it came to the production, because he knew I wanted to be involved, that I've always been involved in that aspect, that I get involved very much in the engineering side of things, and he wasn't quite used to that. You know, he'd always, or not always, Dave Gilmour's obviously very involved, but with a lot of artists, they like to get involved purely in the creative side musically and leave the knobs to the producer. Well, I like to get involved in all areas, so it was a bit difficult initially to find out where we were going to sit in the studio. But once that had been established, it was a great relationship. And it's unusual to say this, but I'd work with him again. I didn't think I'd say that.
In addition to working the knobs, as you say, you were pretty busy recording this record. I mean, you played just about every instrument on the album, right?
Well, it's actually come up quite a lot that you play bass and all the keyboards and the guitars and the vocals and involved in the engineering and production. I honestly don't think it's any big deal. It's just happened to work out that way. A lot of people play multiple instruments. I've just kind of always done it, and with Yes, I don't do all the instruments, but I do play a lot of the keyboards. I obviously play the guitars, get involved in the backing vocals. So the only person's job I took on this album, on this, was Chris Squires. I'm playing bass on the album, so it was really. I don't think it's any big deal. To me, the thing that I think is important is that I'm happy with the album, and I think musically it works. Without having any kind of gimmicks that might be looked upon as being important aspects in selling the thing.
The first single from the record is Something to Hold On To. Did you pick that single yourself?
That actually was picked a combination of record company and myself and management. I always liked the song, and in fact it was one of the songs I first presented to Elektra. And the head of the company, Bob Krasnow, was always pretty determined that was to be the first single, and I kind of agreed with him. I think there are other songs which are just as strong as far as singles go, but it's really an album's album. It's not a bunch of singles stuck on an album. It is an album, and that I feel that's what I attempted to do for it to flow. But that was the natural choice.
Is that pretty much your pattern? When you write a song, do you think first of it as a single, or do you just go with what flows out of you?
I try and all that I do after the event, because I think it kind of can affect the growth of the album and the music if you try and put preconceived ideas as to what how it should be approached. And I like to just get in and write and write and write, and then find a feeling, what the album is, the feeling, the heartbeat, the soul, the blood of the whole album. And then once it's all done, then go in and look at the songs and say, well, what do we have here, singles? So I don't really go and say, right, I'm going to do a single and then put a whole bunch of fillers in. I look at the whole thing.
You used Yes drummer Alan White on a few songs. Which ones were they?
Now let me think. Such a long album, I can't remember. He played on Cover Up and I Miss You Now. And what he did with that was he worked with the machine, because those were tracks that there was a machine. I wanted a very kind of robotic feel to it. So machine was used in conjunction with Alan. And the reason for that is Alan works exceptionally well with machines. He's also not bad on his own. But he knows how to work with the machine. He's very good at playing absolutely in time with the machine without any flams. And so those were the two tracks that I think he successfully worked along with the machine on.
On the song I Can't Look Away, that's the one that you present your view of apartheid in. Could you elaborate on that a little bit, your position?
Can't Look Away, it's really it's just commentary on what I see is going on there and in South Africa. And it's also the fact that I left 10, 11 years ago, and the problem kind of, the feeling and the anxiety and worry of what goes on there stays with me. It's not something I could sweep under the rug, hence the title of the song, Can't Look Away.
The song Sorrow Your Heart is a really interesting sounding song. Could you explain what your idea was with that one?
What I wanted to do with Sorrow is take a very sad lyric. I mean, if you just read the lyric on its own, it's a pretty sad song. But I wanted to put it along with a very happy, bouncy kind of African backing track. So the music, in essence, the music contradicts the lyric, and the lyric the music. And that was really what I tried to do with that song.
There's a great lyric on the song Cover Up. The line goes, "The more you learn, the more you hide." Could you explain that?
That's really just looking at, human beings from the day they're born to, I can only comment up to my age. I have a 3-year-old kid, and it just amazes me to watch the open-mindedness and just totally open and naive and yet very astute kind of attitude that he has. And then looking at, through life what happens to one. You know, how you get told you can't do this, you can't do that, and you get a lot of your imagination and a lot of your inspiration just gets kicked out of you. And so therefore the lyric, the more you learn, the more you hide, the more you get to know about, the more introvert you might become.
The next song, Promises, segs right out of the song Cover Up. Why did you decide to do that with no interruption in between the tunes?
Well, because the lyric is, it's not exactly attached, but it's almost like a footnote for Cover Up, the lyric. It's about, it's really my, you know, I was talking about myself, talking to my kid, saying, look for the questions on the minds of those who care. Don't be led blindly, and in other words, look to me for the answers, and then at the same time I'm turning around to the people I'm supposed to be looking to for answers, the leaders of the of our world, and saying, you keep lying to me, don't give me promises when all you do is lie. You know, what am I going to tell my kid? So that's really what that's about.
Now, I thought that song, Étoile Noire, that was really interesting. It has this very calm opening, and then it goes into this hard, rocking Eyes of Love. Was this the idea, just to have like a little interlude there? That's
kind of when the heavy riff comes in. It's supposed to be a variation on that theme, and just done in a very light and, as you say, gentle way, and then contrasting as the actual theme comes in. It just, you know, it's supposed to come in like a ton of bricks. So that was the idea for the beginning, and it became something which was quite different in color to when the song does kick in. So I decided it deserves its own name. And given the lyric on Eyes of Love, look down on me, when are you going to see? I thought Étoile Noire would be a good title. It also sounds better in French than in English, which is Black Star.
The next one, I Don't Think It Would Last, that's got this great, funky, slinky guitar piece in there. And it's also got like this very interesting twist to a love song.
Yeah, that's pretty light-hearted. It's about the shallowest lyric on the album. And fun. It's a fun lyric, and it's supposed to be humorous. It's about, you know, the guy meets this girl, doesn't know what she really does. He finds her on the street and then realizes she's a hooker, but gets her in, and she doesn't want to leave. So that's really what it's about.
Okay, with the song Hold On To Me, that presents a vulnerable side of you that is not really much evident on a lot of the other stuff, but it also has this hopeful feeling. Do you think that's true?
That's very accurate, in fact. As far as the vulnerable side of it goes, I think that's... I wrote that song, it must be 16 years ago now. It was one of my early songs, and I've just updated it, and I've always liked the song. Lyrically, what I like about it is it does have that hopeful kind of edge to it, and has the same kind of sentiment as one of the songs I wrote on the last Yes album, Love Will Find a Way. Hold on to love, hold on to me. Love will find a way. Same kind of sentiment.
When you're writing, Trevor, do you tend to come up with a lyrical idea first, or do you come up with a musical idea?
I've never worked that out. I've never been able to find a formula in writing songs. I wish I could, but I'll never be a jingle writer, because I'm never able to walk into the studio and say, okay, for the next 12 hours I'm going to write. It just doesn't happen like that. You know, when something comes to me, then I'll put it down. I've got to the point where any time anything comes to me, whether I'm watching a movie or at a show, I'll run out and make sure I have my cassette with me and just put it down so it's documented. But sometimes I'll get an idea for a lyric. For example, on Sorrow, the idea for the lyric came before the music. And although the music kind of was in my mind, but it kind of followed. A song like Something to Hold On To, it all happened at once. And then there were other songs where, for example, a song like Eyes of Love, the music came before the lyric.
All right, something I really want to know is what did you drink at the beginning of Sludge? It was all of a sudden Trevor Rabin becomes Funky Man or something.
I wanted to have on the album one track that's just sounds like exactly what you're talking about, like I drank a bottle of petrol or something, you know. And my ears started oozing with Slimo or something like that. It was just a crazy fun track, and you know, went from a real heavy slamming kind of fusion meets metal kind of thing into something in 17/8, which is just hopefully to a lot of people just incredibly confusing. That was the idea, just to confuse the hell out of people.
Okay, the song I Miss You Now, that has a very heartfelt sentiment. Is that hard for you to share that with hopefully millions of record buyers and millions more radio listeners?
Yeah, sometimes it is. Sometimes sometimes I edit my lyrics down. When I go a little too inside myself, or maybe get too self-indulgent, and the skeletons start coming out a little too much, then I'll hold back just a touch. But I think I let out enough that it's. I need to let out enough so that what I'm singing about is saying something, particularly to me, so that I can sing it with some real feeling and emotion. But sometimes I get real choked up on some of those kind of lyrics. I think one of the great things about doing what I do is it allows me to let out certain frustrations and feelings that would normally be just kept inside, and it's a great outlet for that.
Sure can be. You began studying classical music. What instrument did you play?
I played piano. I started when I was about 6 years old, and contrary to popular belief, I was never a great student. I was an awful student and played most of the things by ear, and it took me a long time to become a good reader. And I became a good reader only because I started doing session work at about 15 years old. And I started getting booked a lot doing sessions, and realized, the more difficult sessions that happened, that my reading had to be good. So I was forced to become a good reader. And that intrigued me, and then I decided I was very curious about conducting and arranging, because I was working for these guys who were doing this, and I sensed the power of bringing in a 90-piece band, and thought, God, that's great. And so I studied to do that, and a lot of it I just taught myself. I mean, I did have a guy, Walter Money, a Canadian professor, taught me a lot about arranging, and basically went through the curriculum of Bachelor of Music course, a lot of it, and that's what I learnt. And at the end of the day, a lot of it I just picked up by practical application. I started doing a lot of sessions with orchestras and arranging and producing for big bands, and so that just led to me being able to do that. So I was trained, but I was a terrible student, and most of what I managed to be able to do in that genre was really mostly practical, from practical experience. There were students that academically made me look like a moron, History of music I didn't really have much interest in. Consequently, when doing tests and stuff on the history of music, I was dismal failure, because I didn't care about it that much. I didn't want to know what Mozart ate for breakfast, I wanted to know how he did what he did, and I don't think what he had for breakfast that morning influenced it in any way. And if it did, I wasn't there to become a psychologist, so... But at the same time, I'm not saying it's not an important aspect, and I think those things should be documented. But there were students who were brilliant academics, but when it came to composition and composing stuff, they just couldn't do it, So I think it's very important, and I mean, there's a need for those people as well, because you need people to be able to teach that. I would be a terrible teacher. I've taught guitar to a small degree, and I'm a terrible, impatient teacher. So I think my biggest asset was the fact that I can create, not that I can retain.
Okay, so you were studying classic music. I bet your parents were absolutely delighted with you. But then you turned to the evil rock. What happened now? What turned you on to rock music?
Well, I was always into it. In fact, when I was playing in these classical music competitions, the incentive to do well was because my father would buy me a rock and roll record if I did well, and eventually buy me a guitar. And then at 13, I liked the idea of playing in a band, because there were a lot of perks involved. So that's how that came about. But on a serious, when it became more serious was obviously a little later down the line. But at the age of about 16, I knew that's exactly what I was going to do. There was never any doubt that that's what I was going to do. And there was one point where I thought I was really enjoying arranging and was going to seriously go in and become a conductor. And it was my father, who's for a long time the lead violinist of the Johannesburg Symphony Orchestra. And but he was incredibly hip. He'd finish a concert, playing Handel's Messiah, and come home and put on Electric Ladyland and sit back and listen to it. So he's pretty cool. And he suggested, he said, look, stick with rock and roll. It's great music, and you do it well, so that's where you should be.
Great. I love the way you phrased that about playing in a band, that there's a lot of perks involved. I guess you discovered quite a few perks with the band Rabbit.
Oh, too many perks with Rabbit. That was a phenomenon that hasn't happened before and since, actually. That kind of in South Africa anyway, that kind of adulation. It was overwhelming. It was very strange. But it happened when I was very young. The band started becoming really successful from when I was 16 and grew right up until I left South Africa in 1978. One positive thing about it was I came to a slamming halt when I went to London because nobody knew about me, and that kind of prepared me far more realistically for the next set of highs, which were with Yes.
Yeah, speaking of highs, let's talk about that a second here. You've been accused or credited or whatever of changing Yes into a commercial band. Now that's got to be a little bit ludicrous for you considering their success, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a bit ludicrous. Well, first of all, it wasn't my idea to name the band Yes. We were called something else, and Chris Squire called me and said, I want to put a band together, and I said, well, what do you want to do? Because I was very concerned that, I didn't want to do what Yes had done in the past, and not because I didn't like it, but because I like to try and be, for good or for bad, somewhat of a catalyst in what I do. Otherwise, I don't really operate well in any other capacity. And he was very inspiring on the phone and very enthusiastic and wanting to do something new and different and dangerous and try and find some new frontiers, and that really excited me. And we got together, and I never forced any of my songs upon the band. I played them to them, and they were excited, and we did the material. So it's just how it happened. As far as the stuff being commercial, well, unless you're doing something like, I don't want to insult anyone here, but the Yes music, the music I wrote for Yes wasn't the Archies. I mean, it wasn't pop music. It just happened to be music that was different to what Yes had been doing in the past, and became extremely successful. If that's commercial, then great. I love it.
And so do lots of other folks. Now, okay, Trevor, what's on the horizon for you? What's coming up, I guess, in terms of this record? Are there other projects you're going to be involved with?
Well, I'm obviously going to be supporting this record, and I have a band together with Lou and Duncan, who sings on the album, backing vocals on the album, but he happens to be a very good guitar player and keyboard player. He was in Rabbit with me, and we work very well together. And that's the nucleus of the band. As far as bass player and a full-time keyboard player, I haven't thought about who that's going to be yet. But I want to tour this album, and that's really just down to scheduling and timing and the reaction to the album. But I'm very enthusiastic about wanting to tour. As far as Yes goes, we're rehearsing at the moment. We're getting another album together. We rehearsed for a while recently, and for about 3 weeks, and thinking about, okay, well, let's get some songs together, and then we'll look into whether we want to get a singer and who it's going to be. And we checked out some people, but the rehearsals felt so good just with the four of us. It was something. It was strange because that's how we started with the band. It was for the first 9 months, it was a 4-piece, and then when we went into record for the next 7 months, it was still a 4-piece. And very close to the end of the album, we were just about to mix it. John Anderson heard some of the stuff and really liked it, so we invited him in to sing a song as a guest kind of thing, and he sang it, and I loved the way it sounded, as did everyone else in the band. We invited him to sing some more, so it evolved into him singing about 60% of the album, and we got on very well, so he joined the band. And that lasted for a long time, and what's happened is it just didn't last forever. So, and that's great. I have fond memories, and we move on. But we've tapped into the earlier days of when we were playing, and it felt so great recently that we're probably going to continue as a 4-piece. We're about halfway through writing this album, and we got about another about 50-60% of the material still to go, and then we're going to go and record.
Great. When do you think that's going to happen?
Unfortunately, with Yes, that's how long is a piece of string would be an appropriate way of assessing how long it's going to take, But hopefully not anywhere near as long as the last album, which was 18 months.
All right. Well, we're looking forward to that one, Trevor. Thanks a lot for spending time with us today.